2 years ago, I decided to make a video where I ranked every single Disney and Pixar animated film. Everyone seemed to really like that. I thought that a perfect follow-up would be a DreamWorks one. To be absolutely transparent as possible, I still haven't seen all of these movies. I'm still working my way through it. But I have seen most of the ones that people would be most wanting to hear my opinion on. For this video, I'm mostly going off of memory, but let's actually start with the movies that I haven't seen, or I've seen them so long ago that they've just basically faded from my memory. Like, Trollhunters here. I didn't even know that this was a DreamWorks production. I had never even heard of it before I decided to do this video. From what I understand, it's like a Netflix exclusive with DreamWorks behind it. There's a few of them that Disney has, like the Chip and Dale remake. I know absolutely nothing about Trollhunters, but it's probably something that I'm going to have to check out at some point. Speaking of which, Joseph, King of Dreams. It's a film that I haven't seen, and it's one of the few here that I have absolutely, like, no desire to see ever. It's a direct-to-video sequel of Prince of Egypt, and I use sequel lightly. It's based on another story in the Bible, Joseph, the King of Dreams. And it's not because I think this is going to be the most horrendous movie ever. Disney has had so many of these directed-video sequels, and I'm pretty sure many of them are far, far worse than Joseph, King of Dreams. When I asked if this was one of the worst DreamWorks films, people seem to defend it. I don't want to watch it because there's already a better Joseph video out there. Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. I had seen that one so many times as a kid growing up because I went to a religious school, so I don't think that any other version is going to hold up in my mind. Next up, the Madagascar films. Now, I know that I've seen at least one, and I think two. This also includes the penguins, by the way. I remember the Madagascar films being okay, like lower B, higher C tier. I remember them being good, just not good enough that I'd want to go back and see them again in the past 10 years or however long it's been since I've seen them. Now, the penguins, I'd be a little bit more interested in. For Nick-O-Rama, I did their cartoon on Nickelodeon, and it was one of the better cartoons out of the whole set, especially of the later Nickelodeon years. The problem is that I hear that the movie is less good than the cartoon, so I'm not entirely interested in seeing it. Spirit is another film that I know I've seen at least once, but it was so many years ago. Like, I'm talking early 2000. It was so long ago, I needed a reminder that this was a film where the animals didn't actually talk. It's definitely one that I want to go back to and I want to check out again. As for the sequel, which you probably didn't even hear that they had, I hear the sequel is god-awful. But that kind of makes me curious, and I want to see that too. Sinbad is another one that I know nothing about. Flushed Away is another one that I know I've seen, it's just been so long since I've seen it. Unlike the Madagascar films, though, I remember it actually being, like, surprisingly good. Like, higher A tier kind of good. It's definitely one that I want to check out again. Speaking of Aardman, though, Wallace and Gromit is probably the one that I'm most ashamed that I haven't seen. Well, the second one that I'm most ashamed that I haven't seen. I hear that one is really good, Curse of the Were-Rabbit, but I know very little about it, so we're just gonna have to move on there. Trolls 3 is currently in theaters, and no matter what I think about the first two Trolls movies, even if they were the most amazing films ever, I'm not the kind of guy who's gonna go out of my way to go to the movie theater to watch a Trolls movie. And finally, we have the Puss in Boots films.
You what?!
Yes, I have seen the first two Boss Baby films and the first two Trolls films before seeing Puss in Boots' Last Wish. Yes, I do deserve to be gutted like a fish, and you may do so as soon as this video is over. With the first Puss in Boots film, I don't think many people talk about it. I didn't hear many people talking about it at all before the sequel came out. From what I understand, it's okay. Like, it was just that weird Shrek spinoff, and people were complaining that it was the 5th movie in the Shrek franchise. Last Wish came out earlier this year, and it basically set the world on fire, and everyone loves it. As for me, what I want is Last Wish to basically be my DreamWorks finale, the last one of these films that I see. And there's only a few left that I have to get to. of the ones that I want to see, so we're probably not going to have King of Dreams here. But all of the other ones, I'm at least slightly curious about. Like Spirit, Fleshed Away, Wallace and Gromit, I'm pretty sure they're good. Spirit 2, I'm pretty sure that's going to be an utter train wreck that I'd love to see. Because here's the thing about DreamWorks. While many companies have like a consistent style or a consistent quality you go to, DreamWorks has always felt like two distinct animation companies, two different ones. One of them makes very poignant, very unique films, very high-minded, and they take chances that no other company makes. And the other DreamWorks company makes dog shit for babies. Let's talk about the two divided sides of DreamWorks.
How bad can I be? I'm just doing what comes naturally.
Shark Tale. That's F tier. I made a Shark Tale video long ago. It's one of the older videos that actually still mostly holds up. Editing could be better, but I think my points mostly stand. First of all, the movie is ugly as sin. It is horrendously ugly. I tried watching it again this year. Don't ask me why, I was just ungodly bored, let's say. And somehow, the movie got worse since I reviewed it all the way back when. Oscar as the main character is incredibly stupid, he's incredibly ugly, the plot doesn't make any sense. It's about telling the truth, except if Oscar tells the truth, he's going to be screwed, legally speaking, because he's committing so much fraud in the movie. Like, he is culpable for so much financial damage if he tells the truth. Jack Black, who I didn't mention much in the original review, his voice gets so grating. But every single character in the movie is just awful. It is just so awful. I could rant about that film forever, but I already did so let's move on. That's Shark Tale. Monsters vs. Aliens is another one that is got a rock bottom reputation. I made an April Fool's video about this because it is so bad, it's one that I almost refuse to take seriously on any level. Nothing about the film works. The character designs are ugly. Every single character is either boring or unlikable. It's supposed to be a parody of these monster films, but parodies are funny, and this movie is not. Its biggest crime is that it is ugly, it is ugly, it is ugly, it is ugly, and nothing about it works. Like, I'm repeating myself, but there's just not much to say about it, really. That's why I did the whole joke video back in April. Like, one of the jokes, quote-unquote jokes, is that we have this prolonged scene of the president walking up a set of stairs, and then he starts to play Axel F on a Yamaha keyboard to try and communicate with the aliens, and it's just this super long scene that is not just unfunny, it is painfully unfunny. But I guess whoever made the movie really liked it, because that one joke was in all of the trailers. Funny story, I had to miss out on seeing this movie because I was recovering from a surgery, but my stepdad took my brothers and sisters to the movie theater to see this movie. And one thing about me is that I really do like the theater going experience, even if the movie is crap. You know, it's about the atmosphere, it's about the snacks. So I was kind of bummed out. Earlier this year, I take a look at this movie, and I finally realized, even though I was in pain, recovering from a surgery, I got the better deal. The movie is awful. Like, I don't know if it's worse than Shark Tale, but it's something that I actually have to think about. And that should tell you something. If you guys want the full review in Animated Atrocities Season 8, I will definitely give it to you. Like, I know that some people liked the film, but it's something that I can't understand why. B-Movie. B-Movie has one shtick. It's a movie that is not funny. It's a movie that knows it's not funny. And it's a movie that's proud that it's not funny. Unlike Monsters vs. Aliens, I can see why people like that, but you're either gonna like it in a mimetic way, or you're gonna hate this movie's guts. And honestly, I'm in the latter camp. So, the B-Movie is stupid, it's clunky, it's nonsensical. It knows all of these things. Unlike, say, Shark Tale, which thinks it's telling a real story, or Monsters vs. Aliens, which is telling jokes that actually try to work that just fail. B-movie is based on a pun. You know, a B-movie. Like a 50s monster movie, or the movie that no one cares about. It's a B-movie. The plot just jumps all over the place. First it's about finding yourself, then it's about a bee falling in love with a woman who's cheating on Patrick Warburton with a bee now. Then there's this weird courtroom scene, and then there's a disaster movie where every plant is dying. These things don't go in a movie together. These things don't even go in a television show together. It's like somebody decided to play a game of round robin and turned it into a movie. I will give it this. It's a memorable experience, and if you like the attitude of, I am so not funny and I am proud that I am not funny, you'll probably like it. There's a reason it's a meme. But as an actual film-going experience, it is just unpleasant all the way through. Next one in the garbage can is Turbo. To put it as bluntly as I can, it's a ripoff of Ratatouille. I know not all stories about believing in yourself and trying to overcome your inabilities is a ripoff of Ratatouille, but it's an animal wanting to do something that they can't because they're an animal and they need the humans' help. It's also much, much worse. Nothing about the movie is interesting or funny or anything really. Like, I will give it to Shark Tale, Monsters vs. Aliens, and B-Movie. At least they're not boring. Turbo is boring. It is so boring. There is nothing memorable. Like, I saw it earlier this year, not too long ago, and out of all of these movies, it's the one that I'm having the hardest time remembering anything about, except how much I didn't like that stupid mollusk. So let's move on before I piss off all of the Turbo fans. Home is one of the most incoherent films that I have ever seen. So, the plot is that Rihanna's character wants to reunite with her mother, because the aliens called the Boov, that talk in the weirdest way possible, they have conquered the Earth. So Rihanna's character wants to get back to her mother, right? And she wants to get through all of the alien invasion. Here's the thing, if Rihanna's character gets captured by the Boov, you know what's gonna happen? The aliens are going to reunite her with her mother. That is the central conflict of this film. This one gets its own review. I swear to God, because it is abysmal. Like, no, it's here or it's here. It's in one of these places. I don't know if you can go lower than Shark Tale, but Home, it's top 3 bad for DreamWorks. I'd say more, but there's one scene where this purple Patrick Star guy eats a urinal cake in a toilet that has yellow in it. That is one of the most memorable things in this film. This is brought to us by the same company that gave us Prince of Egypt and Shrek 2. And How to Train Your Dragon. No, Patrick Star eating a urinal cake. Brilliant cinema, everyone. So next up on my worst of the DreamWorks, I throw in Croods 1. Croods is a movie that, once again, is ugly. Otherwise, it has nothing going for it. It's just so ungodly boring, with not a single likable character. But its biggest crime is that it's just so boring, and it's really ugly. Like, that's the thing. DreamWorks is much more willing to get experimental with its human stylization. And when it works, it can work really, really well. There are a couple of films that have very interesting looking humans. But when it doesn't work, DreamWorks films look awful. Like, unbelievably bad. Like, the humans in Megamind look really fine, but even in good movies like Rise of the Guardians, the humans are the problem, because DreamWorks just wants to be experimental, whereas Disney will just use the same models for every single movie for 20 years. The Croods is a film about a character named Eep. It's a typical, the young teenage girl wants to go out into the world and make something of herself and do all of the things that she wants to do in the Stone Age, where the film makes increasingly apparent that it's horrendously dangerous. The world in the Croods is exactly as dangerous as Nicolas Cage says, and even more so dangerous. And yes, Nicolas Cage is in the movie as the guy you're looking at there. I don't know why. Like, it's not a memorable Nicolas Cage performance, which is beyond a disappointment. He plays it so straight because the movie does next to nothing creative whatsoever. I've watched a lot of animated films that take place in prehistory, and for some reason, it's such a hard area for animated filmmakers to get right. Like, the only one that I think actually did it was Land Before Time. But even the Disney ones that take place in prehistory tend to not be very good. As for The Croods 2, it is a movie which exists. It is a C tier. The characters aren't as annoying, but it's still not a very creative film. The first half of the movie is basic romantic comedy shit, and then the second half takes this weird-ass swerve, and it's about an evil monkey wanting to get the humans to dress up as bananas to eat them. No, I'm not making that up, and no, it's not as interesting as it sounds, I swear to you. The Croods 2 is a movie which exists. It is very boring, even when it gets weird. Like, the fact that it gets weird is why it's not a D tier. But speaking of movies which just exist, that's also where I put Abominable. If you want to see the most typical 3D animated film in history, Abominable is your movie. It follows every single stock cliche that a 2010s animated movie has. That's not to say it's a bad one, but it's the kind of film that decides to have a twist villain in the last 10 minutes because that's what movies do now. It's a movie that I didn't hate, but it felt like it was on autopilot from beginning to end. Also, there is Trolls 1. Trolls 1 is an animated movie for babies. Like, it feels very much like an Illumination film. It's a jukebox musical that has nothing interesting from it. The only thing of any interest that comes from the film you've probably seen is the meme that singing killed my grandma, okay? That's like the only thing of value in it. It has a lot of bright colors and interesting designs and environments, but the characters aren't very interesting. It's another very stock one. It's more boring than Abominable somehow. And it's a movie that just struggles to exist, really. It's also a jukebox musical, which means that none of the songs are original. I mean, it did have that Justin Timberlake song written explicitly for it, and I do like that song quite a lot, more than most people, I think. But still, it's not worth a watch unless you're... No, not even if you're morbidly curious. Like, if you want to see the kind of train wreck that Trolls could have been, watch Home. It's an okay film for small kids. That's all it is. Trolls 2 is a movie about racism and prejudice, though. No, I'm not kidding. So, the plot of the film is that a bunch of countries are divided and they don't like each other just because everyone is into a specific style of music. The trolls are from pop land, so they go to rock land, they go to country land, all of that kind of stuff. And, like, it's a very obvious metaphor. Like, they don't say racism or prejudice, but that's obviously what it's about. And the fact that it's about that is weird as hell. Like, I don't think that the movie is disrespectful or anything, but it just mystifies me that Trolls 2 is the film that decided to be progressive. That being said, I think Trolls 2 is actually quite a bit of an improvement over Trolls 1. It no longer feels like a baby movie for babies. It has actual stakes, actual conflicts. It's got a lot of crazy, weird moments. It actually held my attention, which is more than you can say for most of what I got so far. I'm not gonna say it's a masterpiece. Like, in terms of talking about prejudice and whatever, it's no A Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's still for younger kids. But for a younger kids film, you could do a lot worse. Like the first one, which does make me at least morbidly curious about 3. And speaking of babies, The Boss Baby. The Boss Baby is another film that's been basically talked down to death. It's often thrown up with a lot of DreamWorks' worst. People throw it up there with Shark Tale, B-Movie, Home, and stuff. And I want to state, for the record, when The Boss Baby fails, it fails harder than any other film. Because one of its recurring jokes is butts. The movie really likes its butts humor more than any other DreamWorks film, which gets very cringeworthy very fast. The Boss Baby, I don't think is as bad as any of the other ones, because here's the thing that mystifies me. There was somebody on The Boss Baby who decided to actually work hard on a film called The Boss Baby, and it's one of the reasons that I decided to review it. The movie has a lot of batshit weirdness, but somebody put a lot of effort into things like the background. There's also jokes that actually do work, which is something that I cannot give to any of these films in F. Like, there's one moment where the Boss Baby and his brother, they need to go to Vegas for reasons that I don't want to get into because the plot is a mess. The plot is an absolute mess, but they want to get to Vegas. And how do they do that? They disguise themselves as Elvis impersonators to go on a plane for Elvis impersonators to go to Vegas. And it's just the most out of left field kind of joke. And the movie has several jokes like that. There's this one moment where there's just this creepy looking dog mascot. As the main characters are going by him, the dog mascot just stares at the camera, and it holds on it for quite a long time. And I also do want to give credit to the imagination sequences in it. Like, one thing about the movie is that reality is kind of nebulous. The movie can't decide whether it's an exaggerated fantasy or some degree of reality, or if it's just in Tim's imagination. Anyway, Tim has a lot of these imagination sequences, which they put a lot of time and a lot of stylization into. Some aspects of the movie are impressive. Some of the aspects of the movie go straight into below F tier. So I don't want to throw it in with the movies that have absolutely no redeeming value. It goes here, below Trolls. I hate that I have to say that, but there is things about the movie that work. Don't get me wrong, the parts that don't work are fucking god-awful. Like, they make you feel the worst possible. But as a person whose job it is to review bad cartoons, I have seen a lot worse. I can guarantee that. So, if you think I'm absolutely insane for saying that Boss Baby isn't the worst, can you imagine what I'm gonna say about Boss Baby 2? Because, yes, Boss Baby 2, or Boss Baby had a sequel, and I think it's actually getting a third one. Boss Baby 2, Family Business. Boss Baby 2, it's not a bad movie. Honestly, it is one of the funniest movies in DreamWorks' entire library. Yes, that sounds insane. Boss Baby 2 is absolutely insane. So, Tim and Alec Baldwin are all grown up and they're estranged. Alec Baldwin decided to become Alec Baldwin. He's a business mogul who doesn't care about anyone. While Tim decided to become a father, start a family, and the two brothers have grown estranged. Then Tim finds out that his youngest daughter is also a Boss Baby, voiced by Princess Carolyn from BoJack Horseman, which is a really fitting touch. From there, the movie goes completely batshit insane. Boss Baby 2 is a fucking insane movie. The first Boss Baby is absolutely ridiculous in its own right, but Boss Baby 2 is a movie that knows how ridiculous the premise is and decides to embrace it. There was one specific moment where I decided that I could not hate this film.
Whoa! How about your favorite bedtime story? You know, the one about...
Uncle Ted was a magical talking baby.
It was a good story, wasn't it?
Well, it didn't really make a lot of sense.
The jokes were good, right?
And it was at that moment that I could not hate the movie. There's also this horse in the movie. Alec Baldwin buys Tina a horse, and it is just like one of the funniest animated horses ever. There's this one scene in the movie that's just this massive chase scene where the horse is taking Tim and Alec Baldwin, who have become younger, to school, and they're causing all kinds of mayhem throughout all of the city. It is wonderful. And at one point, we see in the theater, in the movie, that the characters there are watching Spirit, the DreamWorks film. When the horse in Boss Baby 2 just rips through the screen and just keeps on running. There's also 2 random musical numbers in this film. Also, it's a Christmas film. So if you don't believe me, you might want to check it out. Almost all of the worst aspects of the original Boss Baby have been completely dropped, and you don't even need to see the original Boss Baby. That being said, it's not a perfect film. Like, if you don't like insanity, you're not gonna like this at all, for one. Boss Baby 2 still has some really cringeworthy butts humor. Not as bad as the original, and it's much more condensed, but they still didn't kick it all out. So that is still there, and it's still awful, and I hate that part of the movie. Something else positive about this movie is that it's a father-daughter movie, and it's actually really good in that department. The relationship between Tim and Tina is incredibly believable, and it's actually very heartwarming, which makes sense for a Christmas film, which, once again, this is for some reason. This is a movie that I do want to rank, like, really, really high, but unfortunately, the bad parts of the film, and there are some bad parts of this film, do hold it back. Like, a lot. But I must say, The Boss Baby 2, Family Business, is one of the most unique films that I have ever seen. It is an insanity trip from beginning to end, and I'm just here for it, I guess. Over the Hedge is also a pretty funny movie. I liked it a lot. I like the comedy, but it's not one that I go back to too often. I wondered why. And rewatching it recently, I think I settled on the fact that it's the main character in this film. He's a bit of a jerk. Like, that's the point, obviously, but he's just a little too unlikable for me. The things he does go a little bit beyond the pale for me to really like the film. As a comedy, though, it's got a lot of good jokes, and the Verminator is definitely one of DreamWorks' better villains. A couple of things do hold it back besides the protagonist, and that be, once again, DreamWorks' animated humans. They've got a lot of problems with humans, and it took them quite a while to finally get it right. Like, I think How to Train Your Dragon is where DreamWorks finally got humans actually good. And Peabody and Teenage Kraken is where they got stylized humans right. It's a pretty good, okay movie for me, I think. Like, it's one that I'd watch. It's not one that I'd go out and see. But let's scoop up all of the obvious ones. This is a little bit big. So this goes here, and then it goes here. Prince of Egypt. It is one of DreamWorks' best. It is one of the best animated films of all time. Like, I'm not telling you anything new here. Everyone already knows that. Everyone already respects it. I probably don't like it as much as most people. Like I said, I went to a religious school growing up, and you better believe we watched the hell out of Prince of Egypt. We saw this one like multiple times every single year. That's like 8 years of my life. So I've probably seen this animated film more than anything else on this list. That being said, I do respect the artistry. The Angel of Death scene is probably the darkest in any animated film, at least any mainstream animated film. The soundtrack, for the most part, is beautiful. I don't like the Playing with the Big Boys Now song, but every other one I really do enjoy. It's not a film that I choose to watch often, though, unlike other underrated masterpieces like Treasure Planet or Hunchback of Notre Dame. And that's kind of because of how dark it is. Like, Prince of Egypt is actually a very dark film. with all of the plagues of Egypt, especially the Angel of Death. Like, it's something that I have to be in a specific, explicit mood for, which, unlike, say, Treasure Planet, I could just pop in anytime I want. Like, for Prince of Egypt, you're gonna want to be in the right mood to watch something a little bit more depressing, which I'm not always in. As much as I love Prince of Egypt, I'd probably pick a more fun film instead of it, even if I don't like it quite as much, if that makes any sense. I guess the best way to describe it is I respect it a hell of a lot more than I like it, but I do like it a lot. It's just not something that I go out for all too often. It is definitely one of the best adaptations of a biblical story I've ever seen in animation, or cinema in general, really. It is just that good. And honestly, it's not even my favorite of the 2D DreamWorks films. That would be Road to El Dorado. I actually like Road to El Dorado more for the simple fact that I like watching it more. Miguel and Tulio have an amazing chemistry. It's a movie that is funny all the way through. I really wish it got a lot more attention than it does. It is probably one of DreamWorks' most underrated films. And the soundtrack, I think, is the best original soundtrack in all of DreamWorks. It's done by Elton John, and he put the same attention to it that he did with The Lion King. Some of the songs in the film I listen to over and over and over again, especially The Trail We Blaze and Without Question. And It's Tough to Be a God is still in my head. The movie is absolutely beautiful, and it's one that I'd really recommend watching if you haven't seen it. These two films here, they make me really wonder what DreamWorks would be like today if Shrek never hit the scene. Which, you know, it would definitely be a very different timeline, I can say that much. DreamWorks would certainly be a very different company. Speaking of Shrek, let's talk about the man of the hour. You can't have a DreamWorks tier list without talking about Shrek. You can't talk about DreamWorks without talking about Shrek. He is the man, the myth, the legend. The one who built DreamWorks and made it what it is. He is the one who owns DreamWorks. And he sold green ketchup back in the early 2000s, which I still cannot forget. That was real, and it was disgusting. So, back when I started reviewing cartoons on YouTube 10 years ago, Shrek was mostly a meme. Like, everyone heard of Shrek is Love, Shrek is Life, and I don't think too many people took him seriously. But over the years, his reputation has been really rehabilitated. People really are starting to highly respect this series now. Except for 3. 3 is a boring movie that is boring. It's probably got a lot more problems that I'm not remembering. It's been a while since I've seen 3, but I remember it not being as good as the other ones. Anyway, it's the one that we don't talk about. Shrek 1, it's definitely a more quaint film. It's probably the one that's held up the least. What it has going for it back then was that it was a parody of Disney's fairy tales, which was new and fresh back in 2001. However, since then, it's a premise that's been done over and over again. Like, we've seen things like Hoodwink, for example. And like any comedy, the jokes do get old if you see them time and time again. However, I always had a soft spot for Shrek. Actually, growing up, the original Shrek was my favorite because it's a story about an outcast, and I really do have a soft spot for stories about outcasts. I really felt for Shrek and his plight of just wanting to be left alone with the world frowning down on him. And as much as I talk, it was a pretty funny movie. I think this is one of Eddie Murphy's best performances. Shrek himself, Mike Myers, did get a laugh every once in a while too. And Princess Fiona was definitely one of the more unique animated princesses, to say the least. And what really makes it stand out is the twist on the ending, how, spoilers, Fiona gets to stay as an ogre instead of becoming a human. That's a very clever twist that I think makes the movie quite timeless. It's not the most phenomenal movie ever, but it's definitely A-rank. Shrek 2 is a masterpiece. Let's be honest here. Everyone knows it, everyone agrees on it, every single part of this movie is funny, the story is great, the villain is great. Not every single joke has aged the best, but that's bound to happen when you have so many jokes. other than that, I can't think of a thing wrong with Shrek 2. The climax and the holding out for a hero part, that's just phenomenal. Like, Shrek 2 gets every amount of praise it deserves. It probably deserves more, and I'm going to put it here, I think. That's a good place for it. It's definitely a kind of movie that you go to when you just need a quick pick-me-up. Shrek Forever After is a movie that I've only seen once, but I remember it being highly distinctive. It's an alternate universe movie. Rumpelstiltskin tricks Shrek into giving up the day that he was born, and we see what the whole world would be like if Shrek never existed. And even though I've seen it once, it's something that holds up so strong in my memory to this day, so I have to give it a lot of credit for that. I remember it being very intriguing. Maybe not as funny as the other ones, but having the best story of all 4 Shrek films. In fact, today I might rank it higher than the original Shrek, but I'd have to marathon them again to be absolutely sure. But I think that's a good relative order. 3 at the bottom, 1 and 4 trading places, and 2 the best. I think that's as close as you're going to get to consensus for most people. Rise of the Guardians, I did a video on way back when. It's an alright film, but it kind of makes me angry because it could have been a masterpiece of a film. I'll go over what I liked first. The concept is amazing. All of the holiday spirits coming together to fight a big evil. You know, you got the Tooth Fairy, you got the Easter Bunny, you got Santa Claus, and not just typical Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, and Tooth Fairy. You got these wonderfully creative takes on each of them. Like an over-the-top Russian Santa, that is unique and that is genius. An Australian giant Easter Bunny, that is amazingly hilarious. And Shrek himself is definitely an interesting character. I liked a lot of the action in it. However, there are quite a few things that hold the movie back. And the biggest one would have to be the villain. Now, I don't know how fair this is against the movie, but the villain is not a bad one. It's the perfect kind of villain to make me like a film a whole lot less. Rise of the Guardians could have had the best animated villain of all time. The villain of Rise of the Guardians is the Boogeyman, a creature of shadows who is supposed to look dark and sinister. He's supposed to be the embodiment of childhood fear. And instead, he just looks like a gray guy in a suit with messy hair. He barely uses his shadow powers, and his cunning plan, any cunning he has, is mostly because the main characters do a lot of stupid shit. His plans involve Jack abandoning what he's supposed to do like multiple times throughout the story. And like, he's not a terrible villain, he's very okay, but it's in such a place where when I finish watching the movie, the only thing I could think of is, man, that could have been a great villain. I think we've all got a movie like that had one aspect that was okay that we all think could have been just outstandingly amazing. The humans in Rise of the Guardians, once again, don't look very good. A couple of the main kids look okay, but everyone else, Jack looks okay, but everyone else looks not good. Oh yeah, and the ending has the biggest Deus Ex Machina that I've ever seen. Jack is thrown into a crevasse. The villain breaks his scepter, which stops him from being able to do his powers. And then, because I don't know, it's never explained, he's able to repair the staff for like no reason, and is able to fight again. If it's explained, please do inform me, but I watched the movie several times, and every single time, it just comes out of nowhere. Jack decides, yeah, I can fix my staff now, let's go kick some shadow ass. I'd put it like here, I guess. It's a fun film to watch, especially since, like Nightmare Before Christmas, you can watch it at any holiday, but unlike some of those films, its problems are just too much to ignore for me. Ruby Gillman, you got such a bum rap. So, this movie came out in theaters earlier this year. And by came out in theaters, I mean it was like there for 2 days. Because DreamWorks had absolutely no faith in it, and like every other animated film this year, it seemed to bomb horribly. And I didn't think it was that bad. Consensus on the internet was that it was basically Turning Red all over again. It's a girl who turns into a creature during puberty, and she has conflicts with her family. It's very similar to Turning Red. And yeah, if you're very harsh, you could call it a ripoff. There are definitely plenty of differences. For one, it does tone down the puberty angle quite a lot, so if that part of Turning Red is why you don't like that film, Teenage Kraken is definitely one that might be a lot more up your alley. It's that plot with less of the puberty angle. But honestly, for me, the relationship between the daughter and the mother, it was a lot less unpleasant. From where I stand, Teenage Kraken is very similar to Turning Red, but that's kind of a good thing for me because to me it read as Turning Red with less of its problems, almost like a second draft instead of a blatant ripoff, and I kind of like it more than Turning Red. The villain is also really interesting. I don't want to go into too many spoilers because, unlike some of these other films, this one is less than a year old and I'm pretty sure most people haven't seen it. I'm not going to say it's the greatest movie ever, but it's definitely one that I like a lot more than a lot of people. In fact, I'd put it in between the two Shreks. I liked it. I thought it was pretty funny. I thought the characters were endearing, which is very important for a story like that, and I really did enjoy watching it in theaters. Like I said, I'm being vague about it because it's new, and I don't want to spoil too much. Which reminds me, don't spoil Trolls 3 in the comment section. That'd be mean. Don't do it. Another new one is The Bad Guys, which we're gonna go up here, and we're gonna go up here. The Bad Guys is an amazing film. It's highly stylized, it's constantly action-packed, all of the characters are likable. It's one of the few animated heist films, which is a surprisingly rare genre. I think Fantastic Fox is the only other one that I know of. The plot constantly surprised me, it constantly kept me on edge. The animation was super fluid, the humor was constant, the action was nice. I loved it. It was a surprisingly good film. Like, everyone said the film was amazing, and it still surprised me with how good it was. That's how good The Bad Guys is. If you haven't seen that one, get on it. Like, I will have to get on Last Wish. So, Captain Underpants is a bizarre one for me. It is what I consider a flawless adaptation of the Captain Underpants comic books. It's got the same kind of humor, it's got the same graphical style, it's got a story that really fits. The problem is, the Captain Underpants style isn't exactly a style that gels with me. It's got a lot of gross out. Like, it's called Captain Underpants, what do you expect? So how much you like that, how much you like that film is like 1-to-1 how much you like the books. Where I stand, I've put it like here, I think. It's definitely a delightful film, but the gross out for me personally, it's a touch too much. Captain Underpants, if you might not have been able to tell, it's not really my thing. I'm not a guy who likes gross out. And let's see, let's take a talk about the other two ones that most people don't seem to talk about. Antz was DreamWorks' first film. It's actually really good, surprisingly. So, it's actually one of the more adult animated films out there. Like, it's a story explicitly for adults, like, to the point where kids probably wouldn't like it. Like, I know I didn't like it as a kid, but it's a story that goes deeply into your place in a society and political corruption and all kinds of very intriguing things. The story in Antz is actually surprisingly good. I like the characters, I like a lot about it. One thing they do that's really cool is that all of the insects are to scale, so the mosquitoes tower over the ants. That was a very nice touch. It also gets, like, pretty graphic and gory as far as you can get with ants. Like, in one scene, after, like, this ghastly war as the ants are fighting the termites, one soldier is literally just a head that's talking to our main character here. And it gives you the weirdest feeling of how seriously should you be taking this? Which, to some people, that might be a flaw. It's not a flaw with me. The one thing that holds it back is the animation. Antz is another ugly film. I say that a lot about DreamWorks. Not all of DreamWorks' films are ugly. The Shrek films, I think, are aesthetically pleasing. Teenage Kraken is wonderfully stylized. The Trolls ones look very good. Captain Underpants really fits the style. Boss Baby 2 has actually got a very good, interesting style. Abominable is tolerable. The Bad Guys is amazingly stylized. DreamWorks is just very scattershot. When their films look good, they look amazing. But when their stylization doesn't work, their films look really bad. So you never know what you're gonna get. DreamWorks is the animation company of dualities. I thought it was an interesting film. And it's another one like Prince of Egypt, where it's something that I'd watch if I don't want something like fun and upbeat. It's another one where you gotta be in a specific mood to enjoy it. Chicken Run is an all-around, it's just a fun, good film. It's a little bit slower paced, at least until the climax. It's a liar revealed story, which a lot of people don't like, but I thought it was fine. I don't have much to say about it, but it was fine. I'm guessing that the other Aardman films are better than this one, but this one, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Just not much that I'd really go to that sticks out heavily in my memory. If I had to call it anything, I'd call it a little bit of a quaint film, because I can't remember anything too specific. The main character's determination I remember liking a lot, and it definitely had nice stakes. It's a prison breakout movie, which is definitely interesting, but it's definitely not one that I'm going to be going to over and over again, I want to say. Megamind! Megamind goes higher, and it goes here. Megamind is just a damn good film with twists and turns. It's a wonderful deconstruction of the superhero genre, which really does hold up, even after deconstruction and superheroes have become so overdone and so over-cliched. Megamind is one that I think just really holds up, asking the questions of what is a hero and what is a villain. Once again, I really like stories about outcasts, and that is definitely DreamWorks' specialty. For reasons that are probably more complicated than I can comprehend, DreamWorks is really, really good at stories about outcasts. Their best stories are all about the outcast, and I think Megamind is the story that best conveys that. Megamind is one that I talk more about and give a full review to, but Shay Frillis did a video on this a while back about how Megamind is a subversive masterpiece that says anything I could want to say so much better than I possibly could, and it's one that you should really check out if you haven't. It's just a very good film. Glad it's getting more of a reputation. Maybe someday, it's a hope that we can get a sequel to Megamind, because it's a film that really does deserve one. It doesn't exactly need one, but DreamWorks, for some reason, is usually very good with the sequels. Both Boss Baby and Trolls, the originals were garbage to some extent, but both of their sequels managed to step forward and impress me. That said, they're not amazing at sequels all the time. Spirit 2, which I hear is just awful, and Shrek 3. But I trust them with sequels a lot more than I trust Disney with sequels, and a lot more than I trust others with sequels, at the very least. Mr. Peabody and Sherman goes here. It is what I consider the DreamWorks equivalent to Meet the Robinsons. It's an amazing film that not a lot of people talk about. I don't even remember this being advertised all that well. I know I didn't see it till it got out of theaters, and I didn't realize it was DreamWorks until much, much later. It's an all-around, extremely heartwarming story. The relationship between Mr. Peabody and Sherman in this movie is nothing short of amazing. It's a very, very good father-son movie, which once again is a bit of a weird concept, but DreamWorks works well with the weird. Throughout the entire story, both Mr. Peabody and Sherman both come across as very reasonable, just having a conflict with each other as circumstance conspires to keep the two apart. The animation is actually pretty decent in here. One thing I really like is how they treated Mr. Peabody. He's a very smart character and is so multi-talented you could call him a Marty Stew. It'd be so easy for this particular character to come across as so incredibly unlikable. But for some reason, somehow, they were able to make it work. And on the other hand, Sherman is not the smartest character. They don't make him too stupid, and his more dumb moments never come across as obnoxious, which is more than you could say about a lot of other characters. I don't know why this one did too well. I think maybe because it was a very strange concept for a film. Not because it's a bad one, but because, Captain Underpants, it's a book that people will remember. Mr. Peabody and Sherman was a segment on, I think, Rocky and Bullwinkle, cartoon from the 50s. And I know Rocky and Bullwinkle got their own live-action film around the same time, but still, it's not exactly something that a lot of people had a lot of nostalgia for, and so it ended up quite a bit more obscure. This is one that I would highly recommend seeing if you haven't. It's not absolutely flawless. The character of Penny, her character development is a little bit wonky. She seems to change just as the plot demands. Okay, we got a couple of series left. How to Train Your Dragon. The first one is an S tier. This is very big. Honestly, I'd put it like... maybe here, actually. How to Train Your Dragon is just a very good story. Like with Mr. Peabody and Sherman, it's about a conflict between a child and their parent. That's something else that DreamWorks seems to be especially good at, even more so than I think Disney. But between that, you got Mr. Peabody and Sherman, How to Train Your Dragon, some of the Kung Fu Panda films. The only one it doesn't really work in is Shrek 3. But that one, we don't talk about. It doesn't exist, it goes in the garbage. How to Train Your Dragon is a beautiful film. All of the characters are amazing. The lore about dragons is just outstanding. How Hiccup and Toothless grow together is just an amazing story. How to Train Your Dragon is an amazing film. I love it. It is one of my favorite animated films ever. In fact, I might like it more than El Dorado. It's just such a strongly structured story. However, as for the series, kind of gets worse with each installment. Two is okay. It is perfectly serviceable. I like seeing how the town has developed now that they've welcomed dragons into their midst, but it's just so much less memorable, and 3 goes here. The villain of 3 is its saving grace. It would be a lot lower if it wasn't for the villain. The villain is one of DreamWorks' best, but I do remember the villain being so insanely good. Being just this assassin who is always 3 steps ahead of the heroes. That is just an amazing sense of tension. The rest of the movie, though, is not as good. What really sinks it for me, though, is the ending. The ending is known as a torch the franchise and run. It's, we don't want to make any more sequels, so we're going to give the most batshit stupid ending we can that completely destroys the franchise. Goodbye, don't ask us to make a 4th. The ending is very controversial, and it is a large reason why I don't even want to see 3 as canon. Hiccup decides to let all of the dragons be free and away from humans because humans, quote-unquote, aren't ready for them anymore. And by Hiccup setting all of the dragons free, he has placed them in grave danger because now he can't defend them. And the dragons are all vulnerable. Thanks a lot, Hiccup. Also, I hear it's even more insulting if you actually watch the How to Train Your Dragon cartoon. But I haven't seen that yet. I just really don't like the ending of How to Train Your Dragon 3. It is one of the worst animated movie endings ever. So, Kung Fu Panda 1 goes here. It's another story about an outcast. Actually, it goes here. Yes. It's another story about an outcast. It's actually surprisingly deep. I love just about everything about the original Kung Fu Panda. Once again, DreamWorks is going really great with getting great animated parents. That's beyond a rarity. This time it's with an adoptive parent, which is also another rarity. Poe's adoptive father, he's actually an amazing character, always supportive of his son no matter what he's trying to do. I haven't seen too many Kung Fu movies, but I really do like this one in particular. The philosophies that it goes through is very interesting. I'd say this is actually one of the deepest of all of the DreamWorks films, and it's probably the one that I keep coming back to the most. It's not just insanely beautiful, it's also very action-packed. I like all of the characters. Every single one has an understandable motivation for doing everything that they do. The villain's a little bit on the ass side, but he works for the plot. I also do wish that the Fearsome 5 had more to do, but that's what the sequel is for. Kung Fu Panda 2, this is the best of all of the DreamWorks. Move over, bad guys, yes. Kung Fu Panda 2, I think, is my favorite of all of the DreamWorks films, because it does something that very few sequels do. Most sequels try to keep the status quo. No, Kung Fu Panda 2 actually takes the characters and develops them. Watching these two back to back, you see Po and the Fearsome Five's friendship develop. The villain in Kung Fu Panda 2 is amazing. One of the best animated villains, period. I absolutely love the atmosphere in all three of the Kung Fu Panda films. And personally, I find Kung Fu Panda 2 almost a flawless film, like a 99%. There's only one thing that I do not like about Kung Fu Panda 2, and that's that it has a cliffhanger for Kung Fu Panda 3. Kung Fu Panda 3, I don't want to say it's a baby movie for babies, but it's too close to that for comfort. It is such a step down. It relies a lot more on cutesy humor. It abandons a lot of what makes the first two so great, and honestly, it's kind of a slog. I don't like Po's birth father too much, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I've seen this movie, but that's because I didn't like it a whole lot. It's not god-awful, I just don't remember liking much about it. That's my thoughts on the DreamWorks films that I've seen. If you want more extended thoughts, like a full video about any of these films, just ask me. And if there's a film that I absolutely gotta see that I haven't already, let me know. Cause we all know, I gotta catch up on that Trolls 3 lore. I have no idea how they're possibly gonna top 2. I don't even know if I'm joking about that anymore. DreamWorks sequels are fucking insane. Anyway, that's the DreamWorks tier list. If you want to see more stuff like that, please leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe. I need a drink of water and to pass out.